Order! Order! You are an incorrigible delinquent at times. Behave yourself, man!
Now we're going to talk about homelessness because the number of people recorded as homeless in England now stands at over 268,000. That is according to a new report by the charity Shelter. The housing charity combined official rough sleeping, numbers in temporary accommodation and hostels and social services figures. Shelter says this shows the number of homeless people in Britain has increased by 13,000 in a year, but only uses estimates in Scotland and Wales. Government records aren't definitive, the charity claims, so the true figure of homelessness could be much higher. Let's talk now to Natalie Robertson, who is living in temporary accommodation with her son in South London. Also with us, Gillian Cooper, who's with her family in temporary accommodation in East London, and Polly Neat, who is Chief Executive of Shelter. Welcome all of you. Thank you very much for coming on the programme. Polly Neat, I think it's probably worth explaining why, when Natalie and Gillian both have a roof over their heads, they are defined as homeless.
Well, people who are in temporary accommodation, which commonly means a room, sometimes even for a whole family, in a bed and breakfast, hotel or hostel, are classed as homeless because they don't have a home to call their own. They do not have anything like a long-term or permanent tenancy. And, you know, I think it's really important not to underestimate the devastating impact that this has on people. We see it day in, day out at Shelter, and it's that uncertainty, and it's important to stress as well that this temporary accommodation often is really inadequate and keeps changing. And in fact, in the study we're talking about today, we found that a third of those in temporary accommodation will still be there in a year's time, so it's not that temporary even.
Gillian, how many times have you been moved in the 2 years that you've been officially homeless?
We've been moved 4 times, and we should have moved another move as of 2 weeks later ago.
Right.
So it doesn't stop. It's always a consideration. You can't actually collect things. You can't even do things with a temporary home that you've got because you've got to carry the bulk with you somewhere else. So it doesn't even look like a home.
And your 8-year-old, your 14-year-old, your 16-year-old live in where you are now with you.
Yes.
What condition is it in? What's it like?
Actually, the one that we've got now is probably the best of all of them, but it can get really bad where we've had cases where they've got mice, cockroaches, rats, and actually it's a dangerous thing for children to be actually in because they don't actually take the children into consideration when they're actually being housed in these places.
Which means you can move away from their school, for example, or away from your local GP, for example, or away from their friends.
Yeah.
Does that have a big impact?
Well, we've tried to make sure that they've kept a home base for the school. There's one thing that's constant in their life is their school. We've actually maintained the doctors we go to because if we were to move, we wouldn't have all the ID that's prepared to actually join a doctor's surgery. So we've actually maintained our doctors. Other than that, the schools are very important for them, for my children.
All right. So what would you say to people who might be watching you thinking, you're in an all right place now, okay, you've had some awful accommodation, but now it's okay, the kids are still at the same school, and you've maintained the GP and all the rest of it. Why is it a problem that you're in temporary accommodation?
It's a problem because we're not going to be staying there for long. We can't set roots down. I can't let my children join groups. They used to go to groups in our original house. They used to do piano, drums and what have you. But now they can't do any of that, so they don't even feel settled. When we first got to that place, prior to this, we were in a 1-bedroom place with just the whole family, 7 people in one room, which we found out later should only house 2 people. So the overcrowded.
And the reason it was 7 is because your 2 older ones were with you, but they've now left.
Yeah.
Okay. How did you end up homeless, Natalie?
Well, it started 2016. I was living with my mum and I was with my stepdad and my brother in the same home. I had my son, I was working.
How old was your little boy then?
He was only a few months old. Well, when I actually was made homeless, he was 1 year old, day after his first birthday. And I got in a situation where to salvage my mum's relationship with myself, I had to try and make that drastic change because we was clashing all the time and it just wasn't fair on any one of us. So she made a decision to salvage our relationship, tried mediation, didn't work. I approached my local council, which gave me emergency accommodation in Thornton Heath. I was there between 9 and 12 weeks at the time. 3 other families in that property. The situation itself, it was clean, as you would deem clean. We had to share kitchen and bathroom, and it come to light that a gentleman living there actually had HIV and left blood in the bathroom, exposed that to not only myself and my son, but the other families. I approached the council, which they didn't believe me at first at all. They thought I was just pulling their leg, maybe trying to speed up my application. And it wasn't until I actually got this gentleman's full name, done a bit of research myself on social media, because I know, you know, it's very popular nowadays, and I actually found him on there, and he wrote something about having the HIV virus itself, so I took that straight to the council.
And you got moved?
Well, it took a while. I didn't have an official apology or no further investigation.
Where are you living now?
I'm at Connect House now, at Willow Lane, which is currently on an industrial estate in Mitcham. We actually did go to the House of Commons yesterday for a debate with Siobhan from the constituency of Malden and Mitcham. A few scenarios have happened there, and I just don't think it's safe at all. There's, you know, loads of lorries and vans, the pollution, the dust.
And it is actually an industrial estate?
It is. It's not,
okay.
you know, off. It's actually on there. Yeah.
Okay. Sutton Council say they're supporting an ever-increasing number of homeless people. By April 2016, the figure stood at 411, and as of this week, it's risen to 577 households, and they say they're trying to strike a balance between placing homeless families far away or more locally. Redbridge Council say they take the issue of providing high quality and suitable accommodation very seriously. They're trying really hard. It's a top priority as a council. In Redbridge, there's very little social housing stock. Polly, you will know the government is spending more on this. They remind us we're investing £950 million by 2020. They're bringing in the Homelessness Reduction Act. They've given councils the power to place families in decent and affordable private rented homes. They've promised to build more houses. What else could they do?
Well, a lot. I mean, the issue is that there are kind of 2 really fundamental things that are causing this problem, and to be honest, they will undermine any of the other attempts the government is making to solve it. One is there just is not enough affordable housing, and by affordable that has to be for low-income families to rent, not affordable to buy. There just isn't enough, so that's the long-term solution. In the short term, though, a lot of this is caused by welfare cuts, benefit cuts, and particularly the freeze on housing benefits. If the government were to just unfreeze local housing allowance, which is housing benefit for families in rented accommodation, if they were just to unfreeze that in the next budget, the impact on homelessness would be massive. And
Why?
actually,
Because they'll be able to afford private rented accommodation?
Because even people who are working...
You know what, I mean, I don't want to go over your old arguments. You know what their argument would be. People who are working can't afford private rented accommodation, so why would you give taxpayers' money to people who aren't working in order to be able to live in that private rented accommodation?
Well, it's a matter of what level of homelessness crisis we as a society are prepared to tolerate, and the level of, unintended victims of welfare cuts we're prepared to tolerate. And, we're talking about actually people in work and not in work not able to afford the rents because the property market is, as we know, is through the roof. So it is a crisis. It's a human crisis, and something really has got to be done.
This is a message from Aaron on Facebook, and it is quite detailed, but it perhaps illustrates what you have just described, a human crisis. I've been homeless for 12 months now, sofa surfing across my family and friends' homes. I've been working hard since the age of 15, right up until now, age 24, when I was forced to quit my full-time job and leave my abusive ex, who's now left me with a hell of a lot of debt, which means I can't really even afford food. My debts are catching up with me, I'm depressed, I don't know where to turn. I believe the government will only offer me shared accommodation due to not being aged 25 for full paid rent, which is disgusting. I'm expecting to live with people I don't know in a rundown area, and I've paid taxes ever since I've worked and donated to loads of charities. What makes it even worse is I'm a care worker, and a very good one at that. My heart and soul goes into caring and looking after other people, yet I can't support my own self. What do I do? Where do I go? Who do I talk to? Life isn't looking up right now, and I quite frankly feel like it's not worth living, and I'm only 24, which is really, really, really upsetting. What advice, Polly, would you give to Aaron?
Well, to get some specific advice, I would advise him to call our shelter helpline, and we will try and find him the best possible option in his situation, both in the short and long term. In terms of the kind of general point, I think that case makes the point really well, that if you're going to have an economy with incredibly high housing prices and very low wages, something has to be done for people who have absolutely no power in the marketplace. The market is not delivering. And what we at Shelter would argue has to be done is to at least initially unfreeze housing benefit. And to be fair, without doing that, actually the government's Homelessness Reduction Act won't succeed. It can't succeed unless there's actually somewhere to house people, which there won't be with the freeze on housing benefits.
Thank you all very much. Thank you for coming on. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you.
Now to a new report highlighting the plight of the homeless in England. The charity Shelter says the number of people rough sleeping, staying in hostels or temporary accommodation is more than 250,000. Since 2010, the number of people sleeping on the streets in England alone has increased by 134%. More than 100,000 children in England are living with their families in temporary accommodation. Our correspondent Michael Buchanan has been to one industrial estate in London that is now housing dozens of families.
In the world's sixth richest nation, increasingly people cannot afford a home. In Newham in East London, 1 in every 25 people is homeless, according to today's report. Rising levels of rough sleeping are the most obvious sign, but homelessness is not always apparent. This is the Willow Lane trading estate in South London. It's busy and noisy and home to dozens of young families. They live here, Connect House, a former office block, scores of homeless families sent by nearby councils. For Victoria and her daughter Daisy, this cramped room is home.
Do you want some soup, darling?
They've been here since April, 7 months of sheer hell.
All I have to do to electrocute myself here is turn the tap on fully. The water comes out and drips everywhere, all over electrical stuff.
They became homeless when their landlord sold their property and they couldn't find another home.
I have malnutrition and it's a struggle. I need to eat protein and I need an oven.
They do have a microwave, but it's no substitute for home cooking and quite dangerous to use.
It's heartbreaking. I've never seen her so sad in her entire life. Sometimes if she's really tired, I'll lift her legs into bed and tuck her in.
This building is a damning indictment of Britain's housing crisis. More than 80 families, easily more than 100 children are living here, and each family is paying hundreds of pounds each week to live in a converted office. The landlord here gets almost £1 million a year in housing benefit. They say they've costs such as maintenance and that no one is forced to stay here. But still, some are desperate to leave. Was he able to breathe on his own?
No.
Anjali Facey shows me the prized photos of her son Kilani. He died aged 40 days of several complications. Among his mum's regrets is that the ambulance couldn't find this obscure office block when her labour started, forcing her to have the child in the car park.
When I came back from the hospital, when I came back to the estate, I still saw all the blood on the floor. So, you know, every time I come here, I just feel so weird of being here, you know. Sometimes I think I've seen my little one in the bed next to me because I was meant to bring him home to this address.
Following her inquiries, Anjali says she's been offered a move. But her room will be quickly filled. The councils who send people here should have few other options. Ministers say they're determined to end all homelessness, though no one expects it to happen anytime soon. Michael Buchanan, BBC News.